From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Bursell. This is The Log. Well, the Department of War Crimes is really having a very special time right now. The department has introduced a course centered on Western civilization and Christianity this fall in the schools it operates. I guess I never really gave this much thought. Did you know that the Department of War Crimes operates about 160 schools across 11 countries, educating roughly 70,000 students, children of active duty military or civilian service members? So according to this Associated Press article I'm looking at, conservatives have had their eyes on these schools because, unlike most public schools, which are run by the states, these military schools are run by the federal government. And, of course, conservatives have long wanted to control how our kids are educated, and they're getting their foot in the door, at least with these military schools. There's a Western civilization course they're planning for this fall. It uses a textbook published by an outfit called Encounter Books, a conservative publishing house. The title of this so-called textbook, The Golden Thread, A History of the Western Tradition, Volume 1, The Ancient World and Christendom. So conservative Christian schools, think tanks have put this together. And actual historians and actual educators have reviewed this garbage, and they tell the AP that it, quote, depicts points throughout history in misleading ways, representing Western civilization and Christianity as one and the same, and casting Islam as a threat to both. One of them saying they're using Western civilization as a Trojan horse for classical Christian education. So it's right in line with what Secretary of War Crimes Pete Hegseth has been up to. As a part of the military's purge, where they're getting rid of women, people of color, zero tolerance on LGBTQ, as part of all that, they ousted the majority of military chaplains, keeping only the acceptable ones. You can guess who they are. There have been other stories over the last year and a half. Military leadership openly evangelizing. Hegseth himself presiding over Christian prayer meetings. We know from his own writing, from his own books, how much of a fan he is of the Crusades. Yeah, that's how he sees the U.S. military, as a new manifestation of the Crusades, fighting against all the non-Christian heathens, pagans, Muslims, atheists. So now they've got a hold of 70,000 students because they control these schools. They can get away with this. And I'm sure you haven't heard this story. I'll bet you've heard the other military stories, though, of this past week, especially the stories about the USS Lincoln. Apparently, the conditions on this big aircraft carrier are about as good as the conditions in the ICE detention camps. Rotten food, unsanitary conditions, lousy or non-existent health care. I guess morale is tanking. There's this horrible story of a suicide attempt, and the spouse of the sailor who attempted suicide is making the rounds and talking to media about what her husband is telling her about the horrible conditions. USS Lincoln has been on the water for an uninterrupted time at sea of more than 240 days. The sailors are losing it. This is twice, 3 times, 4 times the length of a typical deployment on one of these ships. These guys aren't even seeing land. Of course, Hegseth denies everything. I think the Orange Menace has been asked by the press, oh no, everything's great, nothing to see here. Everyone's happy. And yet, we learned just after these stories broke that the aircraft carrier USS George Washington is now headed toward the Middle East. So apparently to provide some relief. It's going to take a little while to get there. It's coming from, not sure where it's coming from, somewhere in the Pacific. So yeah, Pete Hegseth, to absolutely no one's surprise, doing just a heck of a job. The Orange Menace is ordering the U.S. Navy to remove the advanced system used to launch fighter jets from its newest type of aircraft carrier, and return to using older steam catapults that he's long said he prefers. Yeah, he's been talking about this forever. He doesn't like electromagnets. Now, I can't pretend to know anything about this. I don't. But I can read a damn newspaper. And 100% every authority on this subject, every military expert, prefers the modern system using electromagnets as opposed to the older system, which uses steam power. And you may have heard from earlier incidents where the Orange Menace talked about this. Somewhere he got it in his head that if a magnet gets wet, it is no longer functional. I don't know who gave him that idea, where he got this idea. Again, I know nothing, and I claim to know nothing. But every expert in the field, every military authority who's been asked about this, it's a 100% agreement that this is stupid. That also includes every other nation that has these kinds of aircraft carriers. They all use the new technology because they're not loco. And this is something, one of the few things he can actually do. He can do this as commander-in-chief. He can just order it and it's done. There's no lawsuit that can bring back the modern technology. No, we got to go with the steam technology. We got to go with Steamboat Willie. What an idiot. What a idiot. Oh, and we're out of bullets. We're out of missiles. We're out of munitions. You know that scene in every shoot-'em-up movie? Whether it's a Western or a cop movie, or there's always a big shootout. And at some point, one of the characters, the good guy, the bad guy, sometimes both, at some point, one of them's going to run out of bullets. It's pew, 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 and then click, click, click. Oh, man, I'm out of bullets. Well, that's us right now. That's the United States military. Oops. Way to go, Pete Hegseth. Idiot. Do you remember when he was being confirmed and we learned about these smaller little organizations that he headed up? That was one of the big concerns. Well, you've never run a large organization. Military, U.S. military, is one of the largest organizations in the world. Billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of personnel, very complicated systems. Yeah, it's a pretty big outfit, U.S. military, in case you didn't know. So that was the concern during his Senate confirmation. And then we come to learn, I don't want to look back at the details right now, but do you remember it was two really kind of tiny organizations by comparison? And he led both of them into bankruptcy, basically. He screwed up both opportunities as a leader of an organization. And these were minuscule, not even a drop in the ocean compared to what he's responsible for right now. So he's cosplaying his fantasy as a Christian warrior, crusader, against the evils of women, trans people, Muslims, anybody who's not Christian. He's just having a fine old time, and he's just botching the whole thing, as we all knew he would. Oh, and we lost the war in Iran. You know that, right? That's just over. Well, in a sense, it's over. It's going to, as you and I talked about the other day, it's going to keep on this low simmer until another president, it'll have to be a Democratic president, can come in and somehow put an end to this. Don't ask me how they're going to do it. It'll probably be another Joe Biden situation. The exit out of Iran will be humiliating. It might even be deadly. I don't know. It's going to be a train wreck, just like the exit out of Afghanistan. And then that Democratic president will be blamed, just like Joe Biden was blamed, for having no choice but to extricate ourselves from this horrible FUBAR Iran war. You know FUBAR, right? It's a military term. Look it up. FUBAR, if you don't know. So, just one more time. I am the last person in this world to claim any special knowledge about military matters. But I can read a damn newspaper, and I have eyes and ears, and I'm a citizen, and I'm a voter. And I know what's going on, and you know what's going on, and it is Operation Epic Failure. And the irony of the whole thing is, even if he was doing a great job by current standards, we haven't run out of munitions. The military is strong, competent, morale is high. Even if all of that was true, what good is all this power in the end? The world has passed us by. Wars, fighting wars, as we've come to know them over now many decades, that's not even a thing anymore. We've got $1 trillion budget. We could have a $10 trillion budget. It doesn't matter. The very concept is no longer viable. Asymmetric warfare, terrorist cells, and most importantly, drones, technologies, AI, cyber warfare, planes and tanks, and these big warships the Orange Menace wants to build, this Golden Fleet. It's like everything else with this guy. Stuck in the 50s, the 60s, maybe lurches all the way into the 80s with some of his thinking. It's the bottom line of the whole regime. Unfathomable idiocy. If and when sane people ever get their hands on power again in this nation, we have to turn our attitude about war and war fighting and the military 180 degrees. Everything we're doing is wrong right now. This is sort of defund the police on a mega scale. I know everybody hates the phrase. I understand you hate the phrase. But you know what it means. It just doesn't work. It's not only immoral, it's inefficient, it's ineffective, it's wasteful, it's unnecessarily cruel. Whether it's public safety at home or national security, at some point, enough people have to understand that the year is 2026. It's not 1826. We are at least a couple of centuries behind in our thinking. And when you combine that almost comical misunderstanding of the modern world, when you combine that with the inbred racism and sexism and homophobia and Islamophobia, toxic ideas about masculinity, when you factor all of that in, this is a real FUBAR situation. What else is going on? If you're a little worried about this ridiculous vaccine policy coming out of the White House, well, yeah, you should be. But on the other hand, there's a slim to zero chance that it's ever going to come to pass. Recently in the White House, the Orange Menace signed an executive order, and we know they're not worth the paper he smudges his big fat signature on. This particular executive order calls for new federal recommendations regarding childhood vaccines. So with RFK standing at his side, they basically promoted 30-year-old conspiracy theories about vaccines and autism and whatever else. It's all bunk. It's all nonsense. For many decades now, childhood vaccines have been combined. Measles, mumps, rubella, they're not separate shots anymore like they were decades ago. Well, that's what the Orange Menace, at the insistence of RFK, is now calling for, that they separate all of these shots. Well, of course, it's a ridiculous plan based on long debunked conspiracy theories. If this protocol were to ever go into effect, children would get sick and die because you need extra appointments with your doctor. You need all these separate shots. Instead of 1 or 2 visits to your pediatrician, now it's 5 or 6 or 7. So there's absolutely no doubt some of those appointments are going to be missed. Doctors won't be able to keep up. The pharmaceuticals won't be able to keep up. Just the supply of syringes and cotton balls won't be able to keep up. I mean, it's a crazy, ridiculous idea. But this dumb executive order, like all of his dumb executive orders, not legally binding. Individual states make these rules. The one thing I'm worried about is, like his other illegal orders, he'll attempt to pressure states. Oh, I'll withhold disaster funds from your state unless you comply with these new recommendations. He's done that several times in the past on other issues. So he could do that. But I don't really think he would, because I don't think he really cares much about this issue. I'm not sure why he's doing this at all, except I think he really likes RFK Jr. He's crazy. And I think the Orange Menace likes that. He just has an affinity. Yeah, this is Bobby's pet project. It's not like the Orange Menace's pet projects. No, this is Bobby's. And like a toddler screaming for an ice cream cone, I think the Orange Menace just gave this one to Bobby because, why not? It's easy. It's the easy thing to do. Now, there is one thing I'm worried about, though, and that is that the hardcore MAGA moms, the Maha moms, might hear this and on their own volition go into their pediatrician and insist on it. And then they are putting their own children in harm's way. So without any mandates from the government, just the suggestion from Bobby and the Orange Menace, the Maha moms will do the damage on their own. So that's a concern. But right now, I guess, for the moment, everything's okay. And let's check in on some corruption, shall we? Little stories, as we always say around here, the ones we need to pay attention to, the ones we need to know. 100 things happen every day. There are a few things we really need to keep an eye on. Executive privilege. A DOJ memo, clearly designed to protect the Orange Menace and his regime from the certain subpoenas coming from the new Democratic House of Representatives. They know what's going to happen. We all know what's going to happen. Democrats are going to win the House in the midterms. All of a sudden, it's all about investigative committees and subpoenas. So on day one of the newly confirmed AG Todd Blanche's Department of Injustice, right out of the gate, a memo declaring that anybody who talks to the president is a quote-unquote advisor and thus falls under the umbrella of executive privilege. So not one word that anyone exchanges with the Orange Menace, anybody. Of course, these are the kind of decisions that find their way into courtrooms, but with the current makeup of the Supreme Court, that's always a pretty big worry. So all the corruption, all the grift, all of it under a protective bubble, under a cone of silence, with Agent Maxwell Smart and the chief. Let's hope it works just as well as it did for them. Speaking of the midterms, that's another story that continues to develop on a daily basis. The latest alarm that went off, the Orange Menace doing an interview with Wayne Allen Root on so-called Real America's Voice, where the host suggests openly of declaring an emergency in order to force the requirements of the SAVE Act, which he hasn't been able to get passed. So photo ID, proof of citizenship, limit mail-in ballots, do all of that. And we've been saying this around here for a long time. He's going to find some way to try to do it. An executive order, in this case by declaring a national emergency. And according to this basic cable host, Supreme Court can't do anything about it, requires a 2/3 majority in the House and Senate to override a presidential emergency declaration. Well, I'm not a constitutional expert, but it doesn't take one to know. At this point, it's kind of irrelevant. It doesn't matter what the Constitution says. Only what can and cannot be enforced. There have been some voices on the left telling us for a long time, oh, don't worry, he can't mess with the elections. It's not within his power. And I've said all along, what are you talking about? He wakes up every day and does a dozen things outside of his power before breakfast. And the Orange Menace's response to this little suggestion from a cable news guy, quote, let me just say that stranger things have happened. So we cannot turn our back or feel any kind of complacency about the midterms. Support your local and state election commissions, election workers. Make sure your Secretary of State is on the ball, your state attorney general, your governor, and your state legislatures. Make sure they are on the ball. All right. Well, what else we got here? Oh, the plane, the food cart, the memes, the jokes. Yeah, we talked about it, and it does lend itself pretty easily to jokes and memes. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of them, and they're hilarious. But, I feel I should revisit this just momentarily, because I don't think I adequately expressed the horror at this as well. The Orange Menace left people to die on a plane that, according to reports, there were credible threats that it was going to be shot out of the air. That's why he snuck out in another plane. So nobody is criticizing the fact, well, at least I'm not. Okay, I don't want to speak for anybody else. I'm not criticizing the Orange Menace or the Secret Service or the military or whoever makes these decisions. I'm not criticizing them for putting him on a secret flight. Sure, you got to protect the president's life. I got no problem with that. But for them to allow the other plane to take off and put those people in danger, there's just no reason for it. There's no excuse. You cannot justify that morally. The people he took with him on the smaller plane, Natalie Harp, the person that a lot of people call the human printer because she prints out little happy stories for him all day. The speculation is that she's the one who does his hair and changes his diapers and things like that, too. She's basically his nanny. I don't know. I have no idea. So she was there. Deputy White House Chief of Staff Dan Scavino, Director of Oval Office Operations Walt Nauta, and Secretary of War Crimes Pete Hegseth. Left to die on the targeted Air Force One without their knowledge, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller, and White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. And that's not to mention other low-level staff, the flight crew, and of course, the press corps traveling with the president. All these people left to die, quite possibly, according to credible intelligence reports. How do you do that? That is utter depravity. I need a thesaurus. What's 1,000 times stronger word than that? I mean, especially when you consider the solution is so simple. You think about it for about 10 seconds, you think, well, all right, let's spirit away on this secret plane, make sure the president's safe, and then once he's out of danger, once he's out of airspace, or once he's landed in the UK, or, wherever that is, once he's safe, then you announce to the world what you've just done. Well, because we had credible threats on an assassination attempt, we took the precaution of flying the president in another plane. He's here now. He's safe. Everything's good. You announce that to the world, including Iran. You announce that to Iran. Hey, Iran, don't shoot Air Force One out of the sky. I'm not in it. I mean, the simplest, easiest solution in the world. Well, you're no military expert, Charles Purcell. You're no Secret Service or military. Who cares? It's simple, basic logic. It's easy. So the president is safe. You announce it to the world. You let Iran know that he's out of danger, that he's not on Air Force One, and then you give everybody on Air Force One the option. We'll fly you home like we planned, or you can make your own arrangements to get home. We'll make sure you get home all right. But to allow all of these people to fly on a plane that's been determined by credible intelligence reports is in danger of being shot out of the sky by an Iranian missile. You just take your chances with them. I don't know how to... Here, you know what? Let's look it up right now. Depravity. Synonyms. Wickedness. Immorality. Leaving other people to die. Abandonment. Callous disregard. Criminal negligence. Breach of duty. Cruelty. All right. Thank you, online thesaurus. That really just sums up this regime, doesn't it? It sums up the Orange Menace and his entire regime. How do you... If you're Marco Rubio or Scott Bessent or Susie Wiles or Stephen Miller or Caroline Leavitt, how do you continue to work for this administration? Well, the rumor is that this is exactly why Caroline Leavitt announced that she's leaving the administration. She announced it less than 24 hours after this story broke. So I don't know if that's true or not, but it's certainly a reasonable theory. Would you work for a boss who put you in that kind of danger, knowingly, with such callous disregard for your life? Jesus. This guy's a sociopath. The whole regime. Of course, they're in pretty close competition with Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu these days. Recent attacks on mosques, on private homes, the death and destruction in the West Bank. We know from several accounts that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, will often show up in cases like this, take a look at what's going on, and do literally nothing, witnesses tell us. They'll just watch and then leave. And in some cases, they'll assist the terrorist so-called settlers. All right, let me close with the happiest story of the week. The Chicago White Sox, your Chicago White Sox of Major League Baseball fame, they celebrated their most famous fan, Pope Leo XIV, with a sold-out Pope Hat Night. I guess they had originally planned to give out about 2,500 items, but high demand turned it into a much bigger event. Over 40,000 hats were handed out to fans. And here's the best part. This is the part of the story that's the best story of the week and of the year. For those of you who are Catholics, which I was raised Catholic, the best part of the Mass is the so-called sign of peace. When you take a moment and the priest says, turn to your neighbor and offer them a sign of peace, or whatever. I forget how they say it. I haven't been to church in many years. And you turn to the person next to you, shake their hand, peace be with you. Turn to the person behind you, everyone's surrounding you. And over the years, it's turned into this thing that everybody loves. And it's peace be with you, and hi, how you doing? Oh, I love you, give me a hug. It's great. So they had the whole peace be with you thing in the middle of the fifth inning. You know, kind of like the seventh inning stretch. It's the fifth inning sign of peace. And I saw some video of this. Every fan in a sold-out stadium, and they're all turning to each other. And they're laughing, and they're high-fiving, and they're shaking hands. They're talking to each other, and peace be with you, brother. All right. From this day and forever, every team in every stadium at every game, this has to be a tradition like the seventh inning stretch, or here in Milwaukee, we sing Roll Out the Barrel, along with Take Me Out to the Ball Game. This has to be an every game experience, starting right now and forever. Amen. Peace be with you. All right. This and all episodes can be heard at the website, charlesburcell.com, or on your favorite podcast platform. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. Follow us on Blue Sky and Substack. Peter Donalds wrote and performed our theme song. All right. I love you. Peace be with you. See you out there.